All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty huge that just dropped in the AI world.
Yeah.
Meta, they went and did it again, unveiled their Llama 4 Scout and Maverick models. And we're going to deep dive into this because this feels like one of those moments, a pivotal moment maybe.
Yeah, totally.
Where we got to understand, what these models can do, what's the potential impact, really cut through. There's a lot of hype, a lot of excitement, but also some questions, right?
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we've gone through, a whole bunch of stuff. We got those the really enthusiastic YouTube video analyses, right? We've got some of the more reserved tech news articles out there. And then we even dove into a really pretty detailed research write-up.
Yep.
So what was really interesting is, you see right away there's this buzz, this energy around Llama 4, but a lot of different perspectives on really what it means, what it represents, right?
Absolutely.
So we're going to try and do a really balanced exploration here.
Yeah.
Highlight, the groundbreaking possibilities, right? But also bring up those questions that we're seeing as well.
I think that's key.
Yeah.
Got to be balanced.
All right, so let's jump right into it. There's this kind of narrative building that this is it.
Yeah.
This is Meta's biggest AI advancement yet.
Biggest move they've made.
Open source, multimodal, all that. Yeah. And when you look at the feature set, I mean,
it's hard to argue with that.
It does kind of make that case, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the core things that I think is really turning heads is this idea of multimodality. Right. So both Scout and Maverick can work with not just text,
right,
but they can actually understand images as well right now.
Oh, wow.
And the expectation is that for those downloadable versions of the models, later on we'll see video incorporated in there as well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So not quite there yet with video.
They're not with video yet. No.
Images it can
understand. Images it can.
And then the other thing you mentioned there, downloadable versions.
Right.
So right now we have the Meta AI version.
Right. So you can't download the model itself yet, but they're available through Meta's AI platform.
Right.
So you can play with them, but you can't download them and tweak them yourself.
Gotcha. Okay. And then also worth noting, I guess, that that huge context window that we're going to talk about later.
Yeah.
That's not fully available in the Meta AI version either.
Yeah, that's right. So there are definitely some things to consider, some limitations in what's accessible right now, but that foundational, that base there, that multimodality is huge.
Yeah. And then kind of building on that, right? The ability to work with so many different kinds of data. This generation of Llama introduces the mixture of experts.
Yep.
Architecture, the MOE.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the first generation of Llama to really use this mixture of experts, and it's a pretty powerful way to do things.
So for those who haven't really dug into that yet, what's the benefit? What's the core?
So think of it this way, right? We're dealing with these massive AI models,
right?
And trying to get them to handle every single query with all of their power all at once. It's just not efficient.
Right.
So what MOE does is it kind of breaks down the task at hand, and then it intelligently routes different parts of it to these specialized expert submodels.
Interesting.
Right. So it's kind of like having a whole team of specialists.
Right.
Instead of one generalist trying to do everything.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. So only a small part of the whole model is actually active at any given time, which makes, both the training process and the query answering way more efficient.
That makes a lot of sense. So then let's look at Llama 4 Scout specifically, right?
Yes.
Some pretty crazy numbers associated with this thing.
Yeah, the numbers are eye-popping for sure.
So break it down for us.
Okay, so Llama 4 Scout has a total of 109 billion parameters.
Wow.
Now that's a lot, right? But the thing is, because of that architecture,
right,
with those 16 experts, only about 17 billion of them are actually actively involved in processing at any given moment.
Oh, okay.
So, a much smaller subset.
Gotcha.
But the real showstopper here, right, is the context window. 10 million tokens.
10 million.
That is unheard of.
To put that in perspective,
Yeah.
we've seen previous models, leaders in the space like Gemini with a 2 million token window.
Yeah.
This is
next level.
orders of magnitude larger.
Right.
I mean, all the videos we watch, everyone's like buzzing. They're like, this is practically near infinite context.
It's insane, yeah.
So what does this even mean?
So imagine an AI that can actually remember and understand the details of these incredibly long documents, right? Super lengthy conversations, or even, thinking ahead, substantial amounts of video content.
Right.
That 10 million token window, it could allow for these like whole new kinds of analysis, whole new kinds of interactions, right? It's not just about processing more data. It's about like, a deeper, more coherent understanding across this huge amount of information.
So like give us an example. Like how would that play out?
Okay, so think about like a really complex project with years of documentation, everything. An AI with this kind of context window could potentially hold that whole history like in its working memory.
Wow.
Right, all at once. So you could go beyond just, analyzing bits and pieces and start to see those really intricate dependencies.
Yeah.
Those long-term trends that we haven't really been able to do before.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And the performance claims for Scout are pretty impressive too.
Yeah.
We're hearing that it's being called like the best multimodal model.
Yeah, in its class, they say.
In its class, right, in the world, and that it's outperforming previous Llama models, but also things like Gemma, Gemini 2.0 Flash, Mistral 3.1.
Yeah, they threw down the gauntlet with those comparisons.
Yeah, across these different benchmarks.
Yeah.
So that's
the bold claim.
It is a bold claim. Now, I know you mentioned, earlier, just to kind of keep things in perspective. While Scout is showing really strong performance, right? Some of the models they're comparing against, like the Gemma, the Mistral, they are generally smaller in terms of overall size, right?
Yeah, that's true. So, while the active parameters might be in a similar range, it's not always apples to apples.
Right.
When you're talking about the absolute largest models out there.
Yeah. But still, I mean, the potential, right?
Oh, the potential is enormous.
For businesses especially that deal with, mountains of unstructured data and being able to leverage that huge context window seems incredibly promising. We even saw an example with Box AI, right? They're integrating Llama 4.
That's right.
For like advanced document processing and really pulling out
insight extraction.
From these documents. So
yeah, think about it, right?
Yeah.
We have an organization that needs to analyze, years and years of customer feedback, or really, really intricate legal documents, or just tons and tons of scientific research.
Right.
That 10 million token window, it could let an AI process all of that in a single pass.
Wow.
Potentially finding connections, automating workflows that we just couldn't do before.
Right.
Or that would have been way, way more complicated.
Yeah.
And the tests they've done, the needle in a haystack tests within that 10 million token window.
Yeah.
It really shows that Scout can find things even in this huge sea of information.
Yeah.
And you think about the future, being able to analyze 20 hours of video, that could completely change fields like, security, media analysis, education.
Right.
It's a game changer.
Okay, so we've talked about Scout. Let's move on to Llama 4 Maverick.
Right.
This one packs even more parameters, right? Total
Yeah, so Maverick comes in at a whopping 400 billion total parameters.
Wow.
But again, because of those experts, only 17 billion are active at any given time.
Okay, so it's got 128 experts.
128 experts, yeah.
Wow.
So really spreading the workload.
Yeah. And the context window, I believe, is listed as 1 million tokens.
1 million, so still significant.
Yeah.
But the performance here is really what's getting people excited. Meta is saying that Maverick is beating GPT-4o.
Oh, wow.
and Gemini 2.0 Flash on a number of different benchmarks.
Okay.
And it's even achieving results comparable to DeepSeek v3.1.
Okay.
And things like reasoning and coding.
Oh, wow.
And all of that while using less than half the active parameters.
Less than half.
Yeah. So it's really efficient.
Wow. So that's a pretty direct comparison then.
That's Meta going head to head.
To some of the biggest names in the space.
Yeah, they're not shying away from the competition.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that really stuck out to me with Maverick was this emphasis on cost effectiveness.
Right, yeah. Best in class performance to cost ratio is their claim.
Yeah.
And if Maverick can actually deliver that, right, that kind of performance at a much lower cost per million tokens,
right,
it could really change things.
Yeah.
It could make these advanced AI applications much more accessible, much more scalable,
right,
for a wider range of users and businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's this ELO score that Maverick got on the LM Marina leaderboard, right, for this experimental chat version.
Yeah. So an experimental version of Maverick, a chat version,
right,
based on Maverick, achieved a very high ELO score, putting it right up there near the top.
Yeah. With
models like Gemini 2.5 Pro.
Right.
So it's another indication that Maverick is performing really well.
Yeah. And then there's this other one lurking on the horizon, Llama 4 Behemoth, 2 trillion parameters. I mean,
it's almost hard to comprehend.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of science fiction.
Yeah, but that's where things are headed.
So tell us about this behemoth. It's got how many active parameters?
So 288 billion active parameters.
Wow.
With 16 experts.
So it's clearly,
this is a frontier model.
Yeah.
This is them going toe-to-toe with OpenAI, with Anthropic,
right,
the big dogs. And they're claiming that during its training, it was already outperforming models like GPT 4.5, Claude 3.7 Sonnet,
wow,
Gemini 2.0 Pro on these STEM benchmarks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge if true.
Yeah. So this is still in development though, right? We haven't actually seen it out in the wild.
Right. This is more of a teaser.
Yeah.
A glimpse into the future,
Sure.
but it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Right. And then beyond these, specific models, right? It seems like Meta is also emphasizing some of the advancements across this whole Llama 4 generation, right?
Yeah.
Like the ability to handle, multiple languages, and then also just the efficiency of its training.
Yeah, absolutely. So the fact that they pre-trained it on this massive data set, right, that covers 200 languages.
200 languages.
with really substantial amounts of data in over 100 of those languages.
Yeah, wow.
That's a huge step up from Llama 3.
Yeah.
And it shows that they're really thinking about global usability,
right,
making this accessible to everyone.
Right. And then the efficiency, they're talking about using FP8 precision and really high GPU utilization during Behemoth's pre-training.
Yeah.
So it sounds
they're making it more efficient to develop these models.
They're really pushing the boundaries there, huh?
Oh yeah, they're definitely at the forefront of efficiency research.
Okay. And then we can't forget the open source aspect of all of this, right?
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Meta's really putting that front and center, right? They're saying this is a collaborative effort.
Yeah, they want to accelerate innovation.
Right.
They want to bring everyone in.
And they've made these models available on llama.com and Hugging Face.
That's right.
In theory, that lowers the barrier to entry, right, for developers and researchers.
Yeah, it's more accessible for everyone to experiment.
Yeah. So it is.
Yeah.
So it seems like, a lot of potential here, right? A real step forward for Meta and AI in general.
Yeah, it's hard to deny that. But
as we said at the beginning, there are some questions, some concerns, right?
Of course.
So let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
And look at things from a more critical perspective.
Right.
Are they really leading the way here, or are they just trying to
catch up
to OpenAI, to Anthropic?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there are some things to consider here. While the specs are impressive, there are some points of concern that suggest that maybe, Meta is more focused on strategically closing the gap right now,
right,
than definitively surpassing everyone else in every way.
Right.
And I think the first thing for a lot of people is that Llama 4 community license agreement.
Yeah, the licensing seems to be a big one.
Yeah, it's not quite as open as some folks might have hoped.
Yeah, yeah. So can you break down some of those restrictions?
Sure. So one notable one is that entities based primarily in the European Union, they're actually prohibited from using or distributing the models.
Oh, wow.
Without getting a specific license from Meta.
Okay.
So, this probably comes down to the EU's regulations around AI and data privacy,
right?
Which are pretty complex.
Yeah, yeah.
But it does mean that a large part of the world can't just freely use these models. And then on top of that, companies with over 700 million monthly active users.
Oh, wow.
They also have to request a special license directly from Meta.
So like the big tech companies.
Yeah, the big ones.
Yeah.
And Meta can decide whether to grant that license or not.
So that's a pretty big control.
It's not truly open source in the strictest sense.
Right.
There's definitely some control there.
Yeah. So that could definitely impact how widespread these models become. Right.
Yeah. If the biggest players can't easily use them,
right,
that's gonna have a ripple effect.
Yeah. So licensing's one. What other concerns?
So another big one is the hardware.
Right.
The hardware requirements to actually run these models. Even though MOE makes things more efficient, even the smaller model, right, Llama 4 Scout, with its 109 billion parameters, it's not likely to run smoothly on your average consumer graphics card.
Right.
Even with those memory saving techniques. So we've seen experts saying, you need serious memory capacity. You're going to need professional grade GPUs, high-end workstations.
Right.
And that really limits who can actually experiment with these models, who can actually develop on them.
Yeah. So it's a
barrier to entry.
Even though the code's open, the actual
practical reality is that you need some serious horsepower to actually use them.
Yeah. And then another point that I thought was really interesting is that at least for now, right, the Llama 4 models are really base models, right? Yeah. They're not what we're starting to call these reasoning models. Yeah. Which is like some of the advanced stuff coming out of OpenAI and others.
Right. So these reasoning models, they have built-in mechanisms for fact-checking. They're trying to provide more reliable, more grounded answers.
Yeah.
Whereas the Llama 4 models, as they are right now, they're really good at generating text.
Right.
They're good at understanding images.
Right.
But they're not necessarily going to, double check their work.
Right.
They're not going to give you, a guaranteed accurate answer.
So you gotta take it.
You gotta take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. And there was that little hint, right? That little Easter egg about future reasoning capabilities.
Yeah, they kind of teased it.
Yeah. But for now.
But not there yet.
Right. Okay, and then going back to the performance benchmarks, right? It's worth remembering that some of Scout's wins, right, are against smaller models.
Yeah, they're not always going up against the Titans.
Right.
Yeah.
So while the results are good, it doesn't necessarily mean that Scout is, universally better than every other multimodal model out there.
Yeah. And similarly with Maverick, right?
Yeah.
Very impressive performance, but it's not consistently beating the absolute latest models like Gemini 2.5 Pro, Claude 3.7 Sonnet, GPT 4.5.
Yeah, the top of the AI world is a very competitive space.
Right. And then there's also this narrative, right, that's out there that some people are saying that Llama 4's development was really pushed along by the fact that we've seen these other really capable open models emerge, right?
Yeah.
Like the ones from DeepSeek,
right?
That are reportedly doing as well.
Yeah, matching or even exceeding.
Exceeding previous Llama models, right?
At a lower cost.
Yeah. So it's possible that Meta saw that and said, okay, we need to step up our game.
Right.
We need to come out with something big.
Yeah. So it's possible that
it might have been a bit of a reactive move.
A little more reactive than
rather than purely driving innovation.
Yeah. And then even with that huge 10 million token context window for Scout. We're seeing some early reports of users running into limitations, right?
Yeah.
With the actual prompt length.
Yeah, so the model might be capable of handling those massive contexts.
Right.
But the tools, the interfaces, they might not be there yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's great that the model has that capability.
Yeah.
But if the average user can't actually use it, then it's not as useful as it could be.
Right. Okay, and then the last point of kind of discussion here is, some people are saying that this mixture of experts architecture, right? While it's really good for efficiency, it might actually be a little bit behind
the times.
Yeah.
When it comes to this push towards, building reasoning capabilities directly into models.
Right.
So MOE is great for computational efficiency.
Right.
But the really cutting edge research right now is looking at different ways to make models more reliable, more accurate.
Right.
By building that reasoning into their core.
Gotcha.
So while Llama 4 using MOE is definitely a good thing, it's not necessarily, the absolute latest thing in the world of AI architecture.
Gotcha. And then one final point to bring up here. All this talk about meta tuning Llama 4 to answer contentious topics.
Yeah, the debated topics. They're trying to make it more responsive to those and to give more balanced answers.
Right.
And that's really interesting because, there's all this debate about AI bias.
Right.
And accusations flying around about models being unfairly skewed.
Yeah.
So Meta is saying they're doing this to provide, helpful, factual responses without judgment.
Yeah.
But it also shows just how complex
and
how difficult it is to navigate these really sensitive issues.
Yeah.
And it could open them up to even more scrutiny.
Right. So, okay, we've gone through a lot here.
Yeah,
we've looked at both sides of the coin, right? Llama 4, it's got some really impressive advancements.
Absolutely.
Especially that multimodality, right? And the potential for those long context applications with Scout Maverick's performance and cost effectiveness. And then, the whole open source aspect, even though there are caveats with licensing. Yeah. But there are also some real concerns, right?
Yeah.
About those licensing restrictions. The hardware that you need, the fact that they're not
full reasoning models yet.
Yeah, not full reasoning models yet. And then that big question, right? Is Meta really at the forefront here?
Yeah.
Or are they playing catch up?
It's the big question.
So bringing it back to you, the listener, right?
Right.
You're someone who wants to learn quickly. You want to learn thoroughly. You want to understand different perspectives, and you want to get to those aha moments without getting bogged down in all the technical jargon.
Right.
So, what does Llama 4 mean for you?
So I think
What are your thoughts on today's topic? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay blessed.